Hey people, it is Saturday, 19th of February 2022, Notcast episode 183. Mark is never ever going to stop talking about his records that he really loves. And today I am talking about Metallica's third album, released on March 7th, 1986, Master of Puppets, regarded by some as the number one thrash album of all time. I'm going to say something controversial here, which is this is not my favourite Metallica album. Some of you will think that I'm genuinely lying when I tell you that my favourite Metallica album is actually Saint Anger. And when I come to talk about Saint Anger, I will no doubt effuse generously about why I think that record is my favourite Metallica album. But anybody that thinks that Saint Anger is the best Metallica album is wrong. It isn't. And I think probably if you wanted to go, well, where do I start with Metallica? What do I listen to first? Obviously, the temptation is you listen to the album that's got the name of the band on. But as in a recent episode, when I talked about The Cure's eponymously titled The Cure album, that's a really bad idea sometimes. And Metallica's Metallica album is probably a fantastic classic rock record, but not, in my opinion, a classic Metallica album. Master of Puppets is an album that only Metallica could have made. Nobody else could have done anything that sounded quite like it. And if it was that easy, everyone else would be doing it, wouldn't they? But they didn't. Nobody else could do something quite like this. So this released in March 1986. This is the period when I was a 13, 14-year-old kid, and I was not happy. Like a lot of 13 to 14-year-old kids were not happy. And certainly in those days, you were limited by what your friends and you had in your record collections as to what music you could listen to. And the blank tape saved my life. So for me, Master of Puppets was probably the first Metallica album, or more correctly, the last Metallica album that I don't remember coming out. It has already existed and been cemented in history by the time I got to it. My period when I first got into Metallica was 1988 with the release of And Justice for All, and the friends that I had at school. I was the only one that didn't have a black leather jacket, by the way, so of course I had to be different even amongst the different people. I had a black trench coat, so I looked like Keanu Reeves from The Matrix, but of course nowhere near as cool. Um, they like Metallica, Iron Maiden, bands that I didn't like, terrible rock bands. Some of them were into things like Eccentrics and Napalm Death. And I tried, oh God, I tried, but it didn't work at all. But Metallica, it was love at first sting, to quote the absolutely repugnant Scorpions. There, I listened to them and I was like, this band reflects the noise that I hear in my head. In much the same way as when I listen to classic Black Sabbath, which has got Bill and Ozzy in, I listen to it and go, where was this band when I needed them? Now, I grew up obviously in the 80s in Birmingham, home of metal, surrounded by people from various metal bands. So you'd see people like Cozy Powell or Tony Iommi or Rob Halford or Robert Plant or whoever in the local area, and they were just geezers, the famous rich geezers that lived in my town, unlike Duran Duran, who I think didn't really make many efforts to stay in touch, in my opinion. But certainly with Master of Puppets, it was just the first time I heard it, I just knew it was a classic. And according to the hype sticker on my reissue LP there, I've got 3 copies of Master of Puppets on LP. It is the number one greatest heavy metal album of all time, according to the Rolling Stone Readers Poll. And, well, I can't really disagree with that. That's an original Music for Nations version from the 80s. I did look at buying picture disc versions of the albums, but they are very expensive. And I decided against it, actually. A couple came up quite cheaply, but they never hang around. They always disappear pretty quickly. So let's set the scene for Master of Puppets here. Released in March 1986. As I've told you, this is the 2014 Blackened Records version of the album. Well, actually, this is a version in the 2017 box set, come to think of it. But this is exactly how I remember it, apart from the fact that my friend's copy was a double 12-inch rub playing at 45 RPM in a gatefold sleeve on Music for Nations that was released in 1986. And at the time, I thought about it and I thought, well, frankly, I need the cassette more, so I take the cassette and I listen to the album. This is a classic metal album. If you don't know where to start with Metallica, this is the place to start. It really is. It doesn't get much better than this. Not my favourite, but again, it doesn't get much better than this. And the 2014 and 2017 blackened versions of the albums, by the way, listen to this recently. They are immaculate. These pressings on blackened are as good as, so probably better than the originals. Very, very faithful, very good sonic reproduction, very sympathetic mastering. Now, you might not think Metallica know what a good record sounds like, and if you've heard the compressed version of Death Magnetic, the retail CD, you'll know what I'm talking about there. That CD is garbage, but Metallica really know what they're doing when it comes to mastering. So the definitive version of the album, by the way, and there aren't any singles that were released officially for commercial purposes, at least definitely not in the UK, of Master and Puppets. So I can't do my usual thing of showing you about 10 different 10 inches or 12 inches or picture discs or, razor shaped various die-cut coloured vinyl versions of various things. You'd have thought Metallica would have done in a record store day kind of 12-inch of Fade to Black on green vinyl, and they would have done, Master of Puppets as a 12-inch, and maybe done the thing that should not be as a 12-inch for RSD as well. This is 8 songs, and they're all fantastic. Every single one, all killer, no filler. So we're going to go back to the copy which I bought the first time I bought a copy of Master of Puppets. Maybe 1990, something like that. This one here, a 1989 version on Vertigo, with the swirl Vertigo logo, although you wouldn't necessarily know by looking at it on there. And this was the version that everybody had, pretty much. And I went for the CD because the record was really loud, and I like playing air guitar when listening to records, and CDs didn't skip so much, so I bought the CD at the time. This version has been deleted now for probably 10 years, and it's any version of Master of Puppets sounds pretty good, to be honest, certainly out of the versions I've got anyway. But let us go through this and just talk you through the album and what's on it. So it's an 8-song album, and it probably runs about 50 minutes, so it's tightly packed, and every song on it is a song that both the band play live with some regularity and is really, really good. So unlike the earlier albums, Kill 'Em All and Ride the Lightning, which had songs which you kind of go, oh, Trapped Under Ice, Escape, Metal Militia, they're not great songs. They're songs about people that haven't, or written by people that haven't necessarily got life experience, trying to write about the lives that they haven't yet experienced, if that makes any sense. Whereas with this album, you were starting to see very, very clearly themes and ideas and concepts and thoughts and lived experiences. I mean, they're only, 23, 24 at that point. When you're 23, 24, you've not even been an adult for 5 years sometimes. Certainly you don't feel like it. You treat your body like a temple, the temple being a temple of doom. Of course, that's a joke that I've used before, and you kind of treat your body as if it's somehow indestructible and you can do whatever you like to it. So this is the band at the cusp of adulthood, turning into people and writing songs about what it is to be a person. Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? All of the songs on Master of Puppets, and this is why I think one of the reasons why Master of Puppets is so loved, is because it lyrically addresses a lot of the themes that people really kind of start to grasp at the age of about 15, 16, and in many cases you never get the answers to them. And so, for example, those would be questions around power and authority and control and influence, and around who controls you, or who's trying to control you, and what do you do with it. And all of the songs are geared around that battle for quest for identity and integrity, which is a really important part of who we are to this day. So lyrically, it's pretty damn good in that respect, and also musically, these songs, they are, put it technically, banging. Absolutely, there is not a bad song on any Metallica album around about here on for quite some time to come, although we haven't got to Reload yet. But no, it starts off with Battery, and what we have is almost the birth of a new genre here. Now, Robin, my friend, describes it as being a kind of, that opening chord from the beginning of the Master of Puppets title track itself is probably a genre. But in fact, what we're looking at is not just songs, but we're looking at a constructed assortment of riffs that are designed and tested on humans for maximum irritancy. That's not strictly true. There's a lot of riffs in these songs. You listen to them and you go, they're very, very tightly, densely wound, tightly built, very carefully constructed. And the genre itself is almost kind of like a progressive thrash metal. So the songs are long, they have lots of different parts, they have lots of different tempo shifts, and they're not afraid to drop everything out and just go into an acoustic guitar or to build a motif in that sounds like it doesn't belong to the song at all, and then to rebuild the song back up. It's some pretty advanced songwriting here, and I suspect part of the reason that the songwriting is so good is because the band didn't necessarily know that they weren't following the rules. They were making their own rules, and when you make your own rules and you follow your own ideas without necessarily knowing what the system is, you're not breaking the system, you're building your own system, and your own system will be built with your own individual idiosyncrasies that go in it. So a song like Master of Puppets, for example, which, by the way, is the song that Metallica played live more than any other song in the world. They played the Master of Puppets title song 1,635 times. They've played it at every one of the shows I've seen them at. There are some shows that they haven't played Master of Puppets at. I can think of they did 6 songs on a covers tour in 1998 where they didn't play Master of Puppets. Every time they play China or Shanghai, they don't play the Master of Puppets title track. Normally, at the moment, Master of Puppets kind of sits just after 1, because the ending of 1 and the start of Master of Puppets are very similar. When the band play China these days, it goes from 1 through to Creeping Death. But what is little known, actually, is if you play China, apparently you submit your lyrics and then the state tells you which songs you can and can't play. Any references to drugs are very, very strictly verboten and forbidden, which means that when Suede played there, I think they passed a specifically labelled and designed lyric sheet that changed the line in the song She by Suede from interest in marijuana or injecting marijuana into the lyric that said interest in marriage, do you want to? And they think, yep, okay, that's fine. Interest in marriage, that's a solid moral position to take, and didn't realise that in fact the song includes a line about injecting marijuana. Master of Puppets, the title track, and I know I've leaped ahead. I haven't forgotten Battery yet. I'm coming back to Battery. Master of Puppets, the title track, is probably the definitive Metallica track, but also the lyric, depending on your point of view, is most definitely about drugs, drug taking, feeling bad because you're taking drugs, drugs making you feel good, and then feeling bad because you're not taking drugs. So it's most definitely around that. There's a lyric in Master of Puppets, and this is where I probably should have checked because I can never remember the lyrics to Master of Puppets because there's an awful lot of them, where it's around. Master of Puppets, I'm pulling your strings, twisting your mind and smashing your dreams. Blinded by me, you can't see a thing. And then there's a line about chop your breakfast on a mirror in the next verse, which is very, very clearly, about, well, taking drugs, of course, because who else chops breakfast on a mirror? And then there's also a line about I'm the source of self-destruction, veins that pump with fear, sucking darkest clear, leading on your death's construction. Taste me, you'll see, more is all you need, you're dedicated to how I'm killing you. Now, of course, if I was going to narrate those, I should have done it in a Vincent Price voice and timbre and meter, but since I am merely me and not blessed with a fantastic accent, you'll have to live with it in a brummy drawl. But no, that lyric is very clearly about, and highlighting very clearly the dangers of drugs and drug taking. The line "chop your breakfast on a mirror" is very definitely unambiguous. No one can say it's about a guy that buys too many toy trains and spends all his money buying toy trains. It really, really isn't. It's not like when Guns N' Roses said this song isn't about drugs; it's about a walk in the park when they introduced Night Train at the New York Ritz in 1988. Master of Puppets is about power and control, and that's a theme that runs through the whole of the album. It's around power and control. Who is pulling your strings? Who is crushing your dreams? Who is it, and what is it that is forcing you to do the things that you don't want to do? Now, there's a psychological theory, which is actually sometimes that the brain that is not necessarily conscious, and so your brain is already working on an instinctual level as opposed to anything that's conscious or rational. And so therefore when you see certain things, you get a rush of I think serotonin or dopamine, which by the way are technically the only two things you do enjoy. But it's around using the pleasure centers to control and influence somebody, but also to use fear and control to keep people in line to do as they're told. That's reflected in the cover art of the album. The cover art there is, although you can't necessarily see it on the shrink-wrapped copy of Master of Puppets, it is a row of white crosses of people that have died in conflict, and at the top you can see a pair of hands there and string pulling like a puppet master, strings that are pulling at the graves, effectively saying that there is someone, the military industrial complex is creating imaginary or perhaps unnecessary wars in order to control money, power, dreams and lives. And that's a theme that runs all through the album. Near enough every song on this album is about power and control and the quest for identity and the quest for authenticity in your decision making. Who are you? What do you believe in? What makes you think the things that you do? What forces you to do the things you don't want to do? And then what makes you do the things that you do want to do? Who is the puppet master that is pulling the strings in your decision making process? And there is an element of kind of thinking about things like addiction, alcoholism, sex addiction, whatever form of addiction it takes. That is a master which is controlling an individual. And so therefore when you've got to the point where perhaps you might want to change that approach, and you might want to go, well, actually, I don't want to just, because there comes a point, especially if you're drinking, when the drink starts taking you as opposed to you start taking a drink. And again, it's around being able to vocalize and understand that's the relationship that you're now in. You're trapped in an abusive relationship, sometimes with a part of your own psyche that you can't necessarily control or influence. Master of Puppets is the best Metallica song, I think. No doubt when I start to talk about something of, say, anger, I may change my mind. And no doubt when I start to talk about the album Lulu, I definitely won't include any of those songs in the top 200 Metallica songs. The album opens with Battery. I can't believe it's got 17 minutes and I've not even mentioned Battery yet. Sorry, but Battery is the opening song, and I think the title for Battery is brilliant. It works on many, many levels. So the first one around that is, I think it's Spanish for drums, is bateria. So you look at it and you go, it's a bastardization of the Spanish word for drums and percussion. It's a battery. It's a rhythm, and when you batter something, it's a battery, effectively, in the form of violence. And when you play drums, by the way, unlike a lot of instruments, drums are the instrument that work when you hit something, when you attack something. They're not then, unlike a guitar or a bass or a keyboard, where actually you caress it to create sounds and you do strings. Drums are the only instrument that actually work on you physically hitting an object as hard as you fucking well can to make it boom around the Meadowlands Arena in New Jersey. So the first part of it, Battery, I think one of the layers of the lyric is around drums, assault and battery as well, which is around domestic violence. And the lyric around Battery is also, I think, based upon a street, I think it's San Francisco, which has the old Waldorf on it, which is where Metallica played a lot of their shows, at 444 Battery Street, I'm told. And so therefore Battery is kind of also working as a motif around finding a kind of a sense of comradeship and understanding and belonging in the music scene in which you've got. So you can read the lyric to Battery, and basically it's a more articulate version of Anthrax's Caught in a Mosh, where the lyric is very much around lashing out the action, returning the reaction, weaker, ripped and torn away, hypnotizing power, crushing all that cower. Battery is here to stay. And it's around, basically just letting the anger out when you go and see a band, and you go there and I'm going to fucking play air guitar. I'm going to sit in the mosh, or stand in the mosh pit like a god, and I'm going to scream the lyrics to the top of my voice. And I've definitely been that guy at some shows. I know that. And at the same point, the lyric is around, pounding out aggression turned into obsession cannot kill the battery, the desire to go and see the bands that make sense of your life over and over and over again. But then at the same point, the next line is cannot kill the family, battery is found in me. It's like going, well, I've found my family here. I found, when I'm here, sometimes you find yourself when you're lost in music, which is a terribly bland, cliched phrase, but it is often very much the case. So we create the battery. Battery is a song I think about, firstly, controlling and using your anger in a positive way, and letting that out in an expressive form in a mosh pit, which is obviously in the 1980s going to be full of dudes in denim with long hair that have drunk too many drinks. There's also obviously the Spanish word for battery, or percussion, which is battery. There's the street battery, which is on, but also actually there's a thing about energy, because energy comes in a battery form. So you think about it and you go, right, so actually the battery is a form of condensed energy that's condensed, and it's kind of like, imprisoned inside a vessel, and then it is released. It connects, because a battery, until it connects to an object which is powered by the electricity, a battery is an inert thing. It's just a storage unit. And again, whatever it is that's battery powered, let's say it's a Sony Walkman, until you put the batteries in, it's just a lump of plastic that doesn't do anything. So battery is a fantastic title for this track. Absolutely love it. Also, it's brilliant. I've seen them play it live 2 or 3 times, and every time has been just fantastic. Although obviously live Metallica these days is very different to live Metallica in 1999 or 1986. Track 3, The Thing That Should Not Be. Now, this is probably the song that Metallica have played the least, that I have seen the most. I've seen them play it, I think, 3 or 4 times live. And they haven't played it that many times, certainly in recent years. And this is a fantastic kind of song that's built upon an untypical bass riff. So it's like a descending, or it's not even a descending, it's more like a very heavy, very paused bass riff from Cliff that goes, I think it's called an eventide kind of thing. I don't exactly know what it is. If I knew that, I'd be, a techie dude. But it goes through a very specific set of pedals and effects to sound much bigger and much scarier. It should not be. Theory has it that the thing that should not be is influenced by H.P. Lovecraft. Not exactly a surprise if the band did the Call of Cthulhu, by the way. But there's the lyric inside, the thing that should not be, is around not dead which eternal lies, stranger eons, death may die. Now, of course, what you've already noticed, and I've probably posted a link to it previously, is Metallica like death. Death, 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 and dying. And they say dying and death a lot in all of their songs, so even that dead may die. But in this one, even, not dead which eternal lie, space, stranger eons, death may die. It's bizarre, and obviously they're obsessed with death, but it's a song that is quite threatening in terms of its sonic area. And you can think about, in the context of the rest of the album, Battery and Master of Puppets are around anger and control and aggression and emotion. And the thing that should not be kind of sounds a bit like a threat as well. So it's a flip side of that violence and that anger. And it's actually, when violence and anger becomes a threatening thing, which instills fear and control in somebody. Last song, side 1, Welcome Home, Sanitarium, played live very, very often by Metallica. I've seen them play it many, many times. And again, this is a song, there is a quote that's always stuck with me from Will Sinnott, bass player of the Showman, who was also a psychiatric nurse in Scotland when the band weren't touring. And he said, by his perception, actually, it's the people on the outside that are insane, and the people on the inside that see reality for what it really is, that are probably the most sane people that there are, which also ties in with Douglas Adams' theory from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, book 4 or 5, about Wonko the Sane, who effectively said, actually, the place where he lives is not an insane asylum, it's the only sane place on the planet, and everybody outside of there is insane. Very interesting way of looking at the world. And Welcome Home Sanitarium, I think, is a song that's got some quite curious ideas around your approach to reality. Is actually are the only sane people on the inside, and how does that link to being controlled or medicated? And there's a link between medication and drugs, and in drugs that are used in master of puppets as well, is that they become a thing that allows to control and influence somebody's behaviour. Sorry guys, long day today. We flip over side 2, the old-fashioned side 2. Maybe I should get a CD out, who knows. And we have Disposable Heroes, which also ties in with the cover art to the album, and the closing track on the album, Damage Incorporated. So Disposable Heroes, which I think was not played very often by the band when Cliff was in the band, although I have seen them play it live, and it is glorious. Is a song around war and control and power, and about soldiers, and sometimes about people thinking, well, I'm going to do my duty because that's what I'm meant to do, but then at the same point, a cynicism around who is controlling who is, who's pulling the strings here, who's the master of puppets. There's Leper Messiah, track 6. It's okay, it's not great, but it's a song about organised religion. And it's a song around the way in which organised religion can be used to control and influence people by dangling, the hope of heaven or the afterlife or whatever that is. Song 7 is Orion, which I don't think they ever played live whilst Cliff was alive. Oh, I haven't told you about that. I'm going to get to that later. But Orion, in some early versions, some demos which are on the box set, parts of Orion exist inside one of the other songs on the LP. Because Metallica weren't necessarily writing songs, they were writing 20, 30 musical parts for albums, and then they were arranging them in a way that made sense. So a song like Orion wasn't really written. The individual parts of Orion were written, and then they were kind of slotted up with the other parts that they had, and they go, does this transition between part A and part B and part C, is that the best arrangement of those parts that we can have? And an artist will often have this. They'll have ideas, they'll have riffs, they'll have thoughts, they'll have chord changes or things that they will often carry around for decades before they actually use them and put them into an album. So, for example, I think some of the chord sequence to Pink Floyd's Sign of Life from the Momentary Lapse of Reason album was actually something which the band had been working on during the Animals recording period, but they never actually used it. They found a space for it on an album 10 years later. Fascinating thing to think about, when bands take old songs and they put them back together. Of course, if you're Van Halen, you make most of your last album, 7 or 8 of the songs off it actually unused demos from the 70s that you've written new lyrics for. I've cut down on caffeine, you can probably tell. And then the last track on the album is Damage Incorporated. Again, I've seen them play it live. I think I've seen them play everything on this album apart from Orion, which is a shame. But Orion, I think, is the song that they played least out of everything. And obviously Master of Puppets is the one I've seen them play at every show. But Damage Incorporated is, again, a song about war and death and dying and being a soldier and all those type of things. So there we have it, Master of Puppets, Metallica's third album, the first classic, I think, that they've made, and one that is very highly rated. I would definitely put this probably in my top 4 Metallica albums, which is a nice way of saying I really, really like Metallica, and I think they did fantastic records. Now, at this point, Metallica weren't famous. They weren't big necessarily. They had cancelled a tour where they were due to play the UK because they didn't sell enough tickets. They weren't on radio. They didn't do radio sessions. They weren't on television. Metallica did it the old school way, the way that Bruce Springsteen did it, the way that Frank Turner does it now, is that they get on the road, and as Henry Rollins says, they get in the van. Or if you're a fan of With Nell and I, get in the van! is how they do it. You get in the van, you go on the road, you play the shows. That's how you bring your music to them. And then, you know, you do the touring regime, and then people will get to hear you. You know, that's how I got to hear Metallica, is a taped audio dubbed cassette, a C90, one album on each side, from one of my friends that said, I think you might like this band. That's how I got into Metallica, is listening to them on cassette. And that is how a lot of people, I think, got into Metallica at the time. So at the time, late 87, early 88, you know, my horizons were expanding dramatically, limited only by the number of blank cassettes that I could buy. And so, you know, I wasn't one for thinking, well, I'm going to have, you know, 10 Metallica bootlegs. I didn't even know what a Metallica bootleg was. You know, the closest thing that I came to live music was, apart from obviously Heavy Metal Heaven, which had been on BBC Two in late 1988, was, you know, rare showings of films by bands that I may or may not be interested in. So there we have it. Now, Master of Puppets, as I said before, didn't get much in the way of sales singles. I mean, it did quite well. Eventually it sold, yeah, millions and millions of copies, but it was a record that had a slow burn as opposed to a big bang from day one. Metallica's star was most definitely in the ascendant, and the band were touring the world in order to make people come and see them, hear the songs. They supported Ozzy Osbourne in 1986 on his arena tour, and they played a lot of live shows. And almost all of the live shows that exist in good quality are on the 2017 Master of Puppets Deluxe, Super Deluxe Edition box set. And I've got to tell you, if you're thinking about how do you do a Super Deluxe version of an album, Metallica have really set the gold standard for it with the box sets for these first 5 albums that they've released. And Master of Puppets is glorious. It is, you know, one of the very best box sets devoted to a single album that you've got. My copy, 280 out of 25,000, which is pretty amazing, really, thinking that there's only 25,000 of these box sets, given that this album has sold probably 6 million copies or something. Let's go through what's on the box set. I think that's the right time to do it. We have a black vinyl version of the album itself. Here, a 2017 version, or a 2017 pressing of the 2014 edition of Master of Puppets. You have a second LP here. You have live at the Chicago Aragon Ballroom on May the 25th, 1986. And the Chicago Aragon Ballroom, I've not been to the Aragon, although I have been to Chicago. It's a good town. I like it, actually, and I'm sure the show is absolutely great. This is double vinyl on here, featuring a full live set. I think it's a headline set of 11 tracks, about an hour or so, recorded from the mixing desk, and then transferred, fixed and mixed later on. This box set, by the way, of Master of Puppets, I think it comes with a download code for absolutely everything that's buried deep inside one of the various books and assorted things. You get some badges, although, to be fair, are you really going to wear the badges that come out of a Metallica box set? Probably not. You can buy your own badges. You don't need to get them free. There is a print here for the Damage Incorporated t-shirt. Looks familiar, doesn't it, guys? Designed by the band's graphic designer and general artist at the time, Pusshead. You have a sticker here that tells you you've got 10 CDs, 3 LPs, 2 DVDs, and a book and some other stuff. You get effectively kind of like a lyric sheet that's got the lyrics for the album in here, alongside some reproduction autographs and stuff. And then you get a book here. There's also a hardback book called Back to the Front about the band's period, which I don't have because it's just a fatter version of this, really. And I've only got so much space on my shelves. But there you get to see photographs of tape boxes, track sheets, mixing disc things, tape, again, more tape boxes. you know, when they come to doing versions of albums from 2008, what they're going to do? Take a photograph of the Seagate hard drive that's got the original Ogs and Wabs on? I don't know. And you've got some text that goes with it. Blah blah. Blah 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 and more blah. And again, lots of photographs of you know, various band members doing things. Now, a tragedy befell the band on this tour. They played their show in Stockholm on, I think, the 26th of September 1986. They got in the van. They drew playing cards, and Cliff decided to sleep in Kirk's bunk, and apparently the coach slid on black ice, turned over, and killed Cliff as he was propelled out of the window, and the coach then landed on him. I don't know if it killed Cliff instantly or not. It feels a bit ghoulish, perhaps, even like looking into that and finding out what the reason was behind that. But then a crane came to kind of lift the coach off him, but because there was some black ice, the crane slipped, the coach landed on him again, and if he wasn't dead before, he definitely was at that point, which means Metallica were now a three-piece. Cliff was dead, and the band were missing their friend and had to go and play some shows. And I heard a very similar story actually about when Richie Manic went missing in 1995. Is that the Manics were due to play Japan, and the promoter was saying that the band, by cancelling the shows, have dishonoured him. And he's like, how can we dishonour you? There isn't even a band. You know, one of us is missing or dead. And less than, you know, a few weeks later, the band continued with a new bass player. So the box set has a lot of material in it, and I'm just going to give you a very quick whistle-stop tour through what's here. So we get the 2014 remaster of the album, now in a gatefold sleeve, and an inner sleeve here, alongside the notice that tells you the music on the compact disc was originally recorded on analog equipment, etc, etc, etc. The limitations of the original source material. There's 2 CDs of interviews with Lars and Cliff and James and Kirk, and then Cliff's replacement, Jason Newsted. These are listen once kind of things. I don't really know why I'm not that interested in listening to them. You get a CD of rough mixes from the vault, so you get every track off the album in order, alongside a work in progress mix of a track called The Money Will Roll Right In, which was originally released by Fang in 1983 on the Landshark album. And The Money Will Roll Right In, by the way, was also covered by Nirvana in 1992, I think, as well as a rough mix of a B-side called The Prince, which was, you know, work in progress again there. You get live and interview DVDs, so you get 3 live shows on here. You get the Joe Louis Arena in Detroit, April the 4th. You get the Roskilde Festival in Denmark. I have been, it was rainy, 1986. And you get a show in Japan, November 17, 1986, one of Jason's first shows, by the way, alongside a number of interviews and an MTV special. You get a CD of riffs, demos, and outtakes from the recording sessions that features, I think, 24 demos of various tracks from the album, including, yeah, pretty much loads of versions of Battery and Master of Puppets and so on and so forth, as well as you get a number of other kind of cover versions. You get a rehearsal jam of The Money Will Roll Right In and The Prince, and you get a couple of other kind of rough mixes as well. These are absolutely fascinating, by the way, to hear how the band build up the songs and make the songs out of the component parts that they have. Fascinating to hear, you know, just riffs, and then how they're all stuck together. You then get a show at the Meadowlands Arena in East Rutherford, New Jersey, which I may have mentioned earlier on, April 21st. So that's the 4th live show on the set. You get Hampton Coliseum, August the 3rd, again on the Ozzy Osbourne show. So that's the 5th live show. You get a Jason's audition and the first show at the Rest of Country Club, I think. Which would then make it, I think the 6th live show on the set. The 7th one is this live at the Gruger Hall in Essen, West Germany in January 1987. You also get a fan-recorded cassette of Metallica. I don't know what I'm telling you about. You know it's going to be Metallica. Who else is it going to be? Which is Cliff's last gig at the Stockholm, I think Sun Hall, Solna, September 26th, 1986. Less than 12 hours after playing this show, Cliff was dead. Man, that's a tragedy. One of the greatest losses that there is to music, alongside Jeff Buckley, was the death of Cliff Burton. I think where he would have taken the band and what he would have added to them would have been absolutely fascinating. One of the most innovative bass players that I've ever heard. And that brings you to the end of the anniversary box set of Master of Puppets. There's a lot of stuff in here. The vinyl albums, demos, and all that goes with it. There was a couple of other releases that came out. There was a couple of bootlegs. One which has become available relatively recently is this one here, Fade to Black, at the Playhouse Theatre in Winnipeg. It says it's an FM broadcast. Do not believe their lying lies from their lying mouths. It is an audience recording. It is shit. And that is why, if you know where to look, you can get the vinyl version of this very, very cheap, because it hasn't sold anywhere near enough copies. And so, I picked this up for about £5 actually at a record fair at a bin, because no one's buying it. If you think you're getting an FM broadcast when you buy this, you are not. This is an audience recording. It is shitty. Don't bother. Okay? But that's on me. You take the risk when you buy bootlegs. There was also this one here, which is another bootleg, which is Hail to Fire, which is at the Arena Building, Cape Girardeau, Missouri. I think this is a mixing desk recording. This may have been one of the ones which was available, albeit somewhat briefly, on the Live Metallica website when it was launched in 2003 as a free archive show. The last thing from this era is this DVD, released only in America, called Cliff 'Em All. This is a compilation of the band's favourite bits of their footage from their period with Cliff. It was released as VHS. It wasn't released in the UK, so in the UK there was a burgeoning market for bootleg tapes of Cliff 'Em All, which if you had good friends, you'd be able to see this stuff. And this features excerpts of shows which later appear in full. So, for example, you've got you've got the Roskilde show, you've got the Down the Green Festival, you've got the Metal Hammer Festival or something that's in the Ride the Lightning box set. This is basically an official bootleg of the band's favourite bits of the existing video footage of their periods with Cliff. Everything that's on here is on the box sets, so you don't need to own this. However, I bought this before the box sets came out, so I'm okay with that. I can live with that. That's fine. That's kind of where we are. So we're going to wrap up. I didn't know if I could get 45 minutes of talking about Master of Puppets, but here we are. This is one of the best metal albums of all time, and if you spent 45 minutes listening to me talk about it, you'll probably know that. You will be better used listening to the album actually, and then go, like that, I'll buy more of their stuff. The deluxe, super deluxe box set here is absolutely one of the most definitive, gloriously outlandish, decadent box sets. It really does set the gold standard for super duper box set releases. It's got 10 CDs on it, and oh man, if you listen to it all in one go without taking a break for food or for sleep, you'd get really hungry and really tired and probably really grumpy. And so therefore, these kind of box sets are things that you listen to over the course of a few weeks. They're not things that you binge it and purge in one day. You really need to spend your time eating your way through these slowly and surely, because there's a lot of content on there. Master of Puppets is one of my favourite Metallica albums, not my favourite, and it's probably, to somebody that's not heard them before, probably the best entry point that there is to the band, actually. I recommend it highly. this album changed lives. It changed my life, actually, because this, alongside And Justice for All and Appetite for Destruction and Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, were albums that I listened to, and I thought, somebody understands me, because a lot of the music that I was listening to at the time was made by people that I listened to, and I was like, you don't know what it's like to be me. You don't know what it's like to be, 14, 15 years old and broke and in Birmingham. You have none of that comes through in any of the music that you're making. And so the bands that I listened to and loved were bands that sounded to me like they knew the world that I lived in. And Metallica, definitely in this album, it sounded like they knew they lived in the same world that I lived in, a world where people were trying to coerce and control and manipulate you and to force you to do things you didn't want to do using fear and rewards. And that is, the bottom line that sits alongside all the lyrics for all of the songs in the albums, all the way from Battery and Master of Puppets, all the way through to the dying notes of Damage Incorporated. It's an album about a band fighting hard to maintain, identify, and keep their own identity and succeeding in doing it. It is a fantastic record. I love it to bits, and it sounds to me like a jet engine arguing with God, and that's probably one of the highest accolades I can give to any record whatsoever. This is a brilliant album, and thanks for listening to me talk about it for 45 minutes. Take care of yourselves, stay beautiful. I'll see you soon. Thank you. Bye.